There's a fine line between criminal genius and breathtaking stupidity. These 32 smugglers didn't just cross that line. They launched themselves over it with a booze-filled torpedo. We're not talking about clever heists. We're talking about plans involving suspicious sausages, unreliable pigeons, and holy water that smells suspiciously like a distillery. This is the definitive countdown of the 32 dumbest, most gloriously failed smuggling schemes in US history. 1. You know the coconut? Tough, waterproof, and a perfect natural bottle for, well, coconut milk. Some Prohibition-era geniuses saw this and thought, let's make it alcoholic. Their plan was a masterclass in over-engineering. They'd import a mountain of coconuts, surgically drill a tiny hole in each one, drain the milk, and then painstakingly refill the shell with high-proof rum. The hole was then sealed with wax and camouflaged. The plan's Achilles heel was its own success. All it took was for just one, of these boozy coconuts to leak. Suddenly, the unmistakable scent of a piña colada would spontaneously erupt in a customs warehouse, turning their brilliant artisanal scheme into a sticky, boozy mess that practically screamed, "Arrest me!" 2. When you're a Chicago mobster during Prohibition, you don't think small. Needing a foolproof way to get liquor from Canada, one syndicate decided to skip the boats and cars and go full supervillain. Their master plan? A custom-built smuggling submarine. Now, erase the image of a sleek naval vessel. Picture a rusty, clunky, cobbled-together metal coffin that was probably designed on a napkin. The dream was to glide silently beneath the Coast Guard's watch. The reality was an aquatic disaster. The sub leaked so badly it was more of an underwater sprinkler system. It barely submerged before the crew realized it was less of a smuggling vessel and more of an express ticket to the bottom of Lake Michigan, proving that being an expert in crime doesn't make you a naval engineer. 3. Prosthetic limbs can be marvels of medical engineering. For some smugglers, however, they were just oversized, wearable flasks. The concept was deceptively simple. Fill your hollow artificial leg with your favorite brand of whiskey, pull up your trousers, and attempt a casual stroll past the authorities. The problem they overlooked was a fundamental law of physics: liquid moves. With every step, a telltale slosh, squish, slosh would announce their secret cargo to anyone nearby. It's incredibly difficult to maintain a low profile when your leg sounds like a leaky waterbed having a very bad day. The sound of their secret stash often led to their arrest long before they even opened their mouths. 4. When you've run out of conventional hiding spots, why not try a little bit of blasphemy? A surprisingly popular smuggling tactic involved taking a thick Holy Bible, carving out its sacred pages, and creating a perfect little sanctuary for a flask of whiskey. The smugglers were banking on the pious assumption that no God-fearing customs agent would dare to disrespect the Word of God by actually searching it. And for a while, it worked. But agents soon caught on and devised a brilliantly simple countermeasure. They'd just pick up the suspicious book and give it a firm shake. The distinct rattle of glass against paper was a dead giveaway that this particular Bible was filled with a different, much higher proof kind of spirit. 5. Hoping to use the era's social etiquette to their advantage, female smugglers often relied on the garter flask. This was a flat container strapped to the thigh, hidden discreetly under a skirt where it was assumed no gentleman officer would dare to search. The idea was to be a sultry spy. The reality was often a clumsy disaster. The metal or glass flasks had a nasty habit of clanking together with every step, creating a very unsubtle clink, clink, clink that screamed, "I'm hiding something." Even worse was the constant battle with gravity. One wrong move or a loose strap could send a bottle of gin on a one-way trip down a woman's leg, shooting out from under her dress and skidding across the floor right to the feet of a very surprised customs agent. 6. During the American Civil War, Confederate sympathizers faced the challenge of smuggling gunpowder to their troops. Their solution was, on the surface, almost brilliant, but ultimately a culinary catastrophe. They decided to hide the highly flammable black powder inside sausages, believing the meaty casings were the perfect disguise. The plan seemed foolproof, until you remember one crucial detail about sausages. People cook them, often over an open fire. The entire operation met a predictable and fiery end when a hungry smuggler accidentally dropped one of his special sausages into a campfire. The resulting explosion of meat and smoke not only blew their cover but likely put everyone off their breakfast for a very long time. 7. You have a truck packed with illegal liquor and need to get through a checkpoint. What's your security system? According to some Prohibition smugglers, the answer wasn't guns or guards, but bees, thousands of angry bees. This bizarre strategy, known as the beekeeper's gambit, involved stacking crates of booze and then placing several very active beehives right on top. The logic was that no inspector in their right mind would risk a full-on facial assault from a swarm of furious insects just to check the cargo. The problem is, bees aren't loyal security guards. A bumpy road or a sudden stop was often enough to annoy the bees, who would then turn on the closest target, the smugglers themselves, resulting in a very painful, buzzing, and spectacular failure. 8. Bird watching is a peaceful hobby, but for one criminal, it was a cover for a lucrative enterprise, smuggling the eggs of rare and protected birds. This specialist would venture into the wild, steal eggs from nests, and transport them in a custom vest lined with dozens of soft pockets. Dressed as an innocent ornithologist with binoculars and a guidebook, he looked the part. His downfall wasn't a sharp-eyed agent, but a simple misstep. While walking through an airport, he tripped and fell flat on his chest. The fall was followed by a symphony of soft, distinct cracking sounds and the slow, unmistakable trickle of dozens of fertilized rare bird eggs soaking through his shirt. It was a messy, gooey, and deeply embarrassing end to his smuggling career. 9. If you thought hiding contraband in a cow was strange, wait until you hear about Florida's contribution to smuggling. During Prohibition, some smugglers in the Sunshine State cooked up a scheme that walked the fine line between genius and pure insanity. They would get their hands on alligators, either sedated or recently deceased, and then proceed to stuff their stomachs with bottles of liquor. The logic behind this reptilian mule plan was both simple and terrifying. What customs agent is going to volunteer to perform an impromptu stomach search on a 12-foot prehistoric killing machine? The entire operation was based on sheer psychological terror and the universal human instinct to not stick your arm down an alligator's throat. It was a jaw-droppingly bold idea in every sense of the phrase. 10. The local milkman was once an icon of wholesome American life, a friendly face delivering daily nutrition. During Prohibition, however, at least one milkman decided to expand his beverage offerings. This enterprising individual used his delivery route as a perfect cover, swapping out the fresh milk in his large metal churns for powerful, illegal moonshine. It was a brilliant business model, hiding in plain sight, until the inevitable human error occurred. He mixed up his orders. One morning, a family expecting wholesome milk for their cornflakes instead received a full pitcher of high-proof alcohol. The complaint to the dairy wasn't that the delivery was late, but that the milk made their father suddenly feel very festive, leading to a quick and humiliating end for the boozy delivery service. 11. For the smuggler who felt a prosthetic leg was just too subtle, allow me to introduce the rubber overshoe bladder. This was a triumph of terrible criminal design. Massive, floppy rubber boots outfitted with secret internal compartments designed to hold alcohol. The idea was to fill these absurdly large shoes with whiskey and then try to walk normally past inspectors. This daring fashion choice was immediately defeated by basic acoustics. It is physically impossible to walk in liquid-filled footwear without making a sound. Each step produced a comical symphony of squishing, sloshing, and gurgling noises that telegraphed their secret from across a room. It was like wearing a flashing neon sign that read, "My shoes are full of illegal booze. Please investigate the sloshing." 12. If a custom submarine was too much work, why not opt for something simpler, dumber, and much more likely to fail? Smugglers operating across the Detroit River from Canada to the US engineered what they called the torpedo system. These weren't actual weapons, but large, hollow metal cylinders packed with bottles of fine Canadian whiskey. They would attach a small motor and launch these booze-filled projectiles across the river, hoping an accomplice would catch them. In practice, it was an utter fiasco. Most of the torpedoes were improperly balanced and sank straight to the bottom. The few that did float were often swept away by the current, ending up miles from their target or, in the ultimate failure, drifting right back to the Canadian shore. It was less a smuggling ring and more an expensive way to give whiskey to the river. 13. A funeral procession is meant to be a moment of solemn respect for the departed. For Prohibition-era smugglers, it was a business opportunity. They would stage incredibly elaborate, fake funerals complete with a hearse, actors dressed as grieving family members, and a very real, very expensive casket. The only thing missing was the deceased. Instead, the coffin would be packed to the lid with bottles of top-shelf liquor. The sheer audacity of the plan meant it often worked, as law enforcement was reluctant to desecrate a funeral. However, the scheme had a clumsy flaw. All it took was one clumsy pallbearer to trip, and the somber silence would be shattered by the unmistakable sound of hundreds of glass bottles breaking inside the coffin. 14. Is there anything more innocent than a child's toy? That's exactly what smugglers were counting on. A disturbingly common tactic involved using wooden toys, particularly rocking horses and other large animal figures. These toys were carefully built with hollowed-out compartments hidden inside. The secret cavities would be filled with narcotics or other contraband before the toy was beautifully painted and assembled to look perfectly normal. The plan's success hinged on the belief that no agent would be cruel enough to destroy a child's plaything. But agents grew suspicious when they noticed some of these toys were suspiciously heavy. Eventually, an agent decided to investigate further, and the simple act of drilling a single hole was enough to reveal the illicit stuffing and end the twisted game. 15. The walking cane flask was designed to be the accessory of a sophisticated gentleman smuggler, a clever rogue hiding his liquor in plain sight. For the average person attempting this, however, it was more often a recipe for public humiliation. These canes were frequently cheap and poorly constructed, prone to failing at the worst possible moments. A smuggler might stumble, causing the top to pop off and create a fountain of incriminating evidence all over the street. Others were caught after simply leaning on their cane too hard, causing the seal to break and drenching their trousers in whiskey. Any attempt at looking cool and collected vanished the second their prop failed, instantly turning them into a clumsy fool standing in a puddle of their own contraband. 16. This particular scheme is a grim and absurd chapter in American history, representing a grotesque effort to bypass the 1808 Act that prohibited the importation of enslaved people. Some truly vile slave ship captains attempted to use legal arguments so stunningly dumb they are genuinely shocking. One of the most infamous tactics was to claim the African people chained in the hold of their ships were not illegal cargo, but were simply crew members. An even more twisted and tragic justification involved exchanging stacks of Bibles for human beings on the African coast. The slavers would then argue they weren't engaged in illegal trade, but in a noble mission to civilize people. This morally vacant excuse was a disgusting and transparent attempt to cloak unimaginable human cruelty in a flimsy veil of religious purpose, a scheme as idiotic in its logic as it was evil in its core. 17. The humble loaf of bread. It's warm, it's comforting, and for Prohibition-era smugglers, it was a potential smuggling vessel. The plan was deceptively simple. Take a large, crusty loaf, slice it in half, hollow out the soft center, and nestle a bottle of booze inside. Reassemble the loaf, and voila, it looks like an innocent part of someone's lunch. The critical oversight, however, was that police inspectors don't just look at things, they also poke them. Their go-to test for suspicious bread was a gentle squeeze. A normal loaf gives way. A loaf containing a solid glass bottle does not. The second an agent felt that unyielding core, the smuggler's half-baked plan was toast, crushed by a simple and effective hands-on inspection. 18. At the height of Prohibition, some criminals looked at a field of ordinary cows and had an idea so dumb it was almost visionary. Their scheme? to craft fake hollow humps, fill them with whiskey, and strap them onto the backs of cows, which they would then casually walk across the border. They were banking on the assumption that federal agents would be too busy searching for mobsters in fancy cars to notice a herd of lumpy, sloshing bipedal camels that mooed. The most glaring flaw in this plan, of course, is that cows do not have humps. Any border agent with a preschooler's knowledge of farm animals would immediately recognize that a creature resembling a cow with a waterbed strapped to its back was probably worth a second look. 19. When all else fails, play the sympathy card. This was the logic behind the sick day scheme. Smugglers would fill a rubber hot water bottle not with soothing warm water, but with potent, high-proof gin. Clutching the bottle to their stomach while feigning intense agony, they'd try to convince agents they were far too unwell for a proper search. The plan, however, completely ignored one of the most powerful human senses: smell. Gin doesn't smell like water. It smells like a pine tree exploded in a distillery. Instead of smelling ill, these smugglers reeked of a botanical garden cocktail party. Any agent with a functioning nose could instantly diagnose that the only sickness they were suffering from was a severe case of carrying contraband that smelled like a duty-free shop. 20. Why smuggle one bottle at a time when you can think on an industrial scale? That was the brilliant, if flawed, logic behind the garden hose pipeline. In a display of true ambition, some syndicates ran a standard-issue garden hose across the US-Canada border, usually submerged in a river. With one end in a Canadian distillery and the other in an American safe house, they could pump a non-stop stream of liquor across the border. The glaring weakness was their choice of hardware. A common garden hose isn't built to handle constant pressure, underwater currents, or floating debris. These makeshift pipelines frequently burst, creating spectacular geysers of whiskey in the middle of the river, which not only alerted the authorities but also likely made the local fish population extremely happy. 21. There are certain things in life people instinctively avoid, and a heaping pile of filthy laundry is near the top of that list. This universal revulsion was the entire basis for one of the most odorous smuggling schemes ever. The plan was simple. Place your contraband at the bottom of a large laundry basket. Then, cover it with weeks' worth of your most disgusting, sweat-soaked, and unidentifiably stained garments, creating a powerful biohazard barrier. The hope was that any customs agent, upon being hit with the initial wave of overpowering stench, would recoil in horror and wave the basket through without a full inspection. It was a bold gamble on the squeamishness of federal employees, and while it might have occasionally worked, it was ultimately defeated by an agent with a strong constitution and possibly a head cold. 22. In the grand history of aviation, pigeons have served as messengers and symbols of peace. For a brief, baffling period during Prohibition, they also served as tiny, feathered booze mules. Some smugglers got the idea to use homing pigeons as their personal rum runners, strapping miniature, custom-made flasks filled with concentrated alcohol to their legs. They'd release them from Canada or ships offshore, expecting them to fly their precious cargo to a specific rooftop in the United States. The critical flaw? Pigeons are not the most reliable employees. The birds would often get tired, get lost, or simply decide to land in a random backyard, delivering a tiny bottle of high-proof liquor to a very surprised civilian who had just won the neighborhood lottery. 23. This next scheme is a true monument to criminal ingenuity and technical incompetence. Smugglers trying to import opium developed a truly unique idea. They would press the raw opium resin with other binders to create what looked and felt exactly like phonograph records. These could then be shipped in standard record sleeves, disguised as the latest musical hits. It was a brilliant camouflage, but it had one fatal weakness. A customs agent might actually want to listen to the music. When a suspicious agent placed one of these drug-infused discs on a turntable, it didn't produce a catchy tune. Instead, the needle would either get stuck in the sticky substance or carve a silent, gooey groove, instantly revealing that this particular record was anything but a hit. 24. Taking a page from the world of meteorology, some smugglers on the Canadian border launched a plan that was literally up in the air. They would attach small, securely wrapped packages of expensive liquor to weather balloons and set them free, hoping the prevailing winds would carry them across the border to a designated drop zone where their partners waited. The fatal flaw in this atmospheric operation was, predictably, the weather itself. The wind is notoriously unreliable and has zero respect for your criminal enterprise. Far more often than not, the balloons were blown wildly off course, dropping their alcoholic payloads into random farmers' fields, onto the roofs of police stations, or into the backyards of law-abiding citizens who were suddenly gifted with a very special delivery from the sky. 25. Touring musicians travel with a ton of bulky, oddly shaped cases, a fact that made them seem like perfect, unsuspecting couriers for smugglers. The strategy was to conceal illegal goods inside various musical instruments. A hollow-body guitar could discreetly hold several small packages. A large double bass provided a massive hidden cavity, and even the shell of a bass drum could be filled with illicit cargo. This plan seemed airtight until the smugglers ran into a customs inspector who was also a musician. An agent with a good ear might ask the so-called artist to play a quick tune. The look of pure, unadulterated panic on the face of a fraud who has never even held a guitar before was usually the final, off-key note in their very short smuggling career. 26. Here's a plan that sounds brilliant only after you've had way too much to drink. What if you hid the alcohol by freezing it inside a giant block of ice? Some smugglers actually attempted this, placing bottles of expensive whiskey in a large vat of water and letting it freeze solid. They'd then try to pass it off as a simple ice delivery for a restaurant. This turned every single smuggling run into a desperate, high-stakes race against the sun. The smugglers weren't just avoiding the law, they were fighting the laws of thermodynamics. A simple traffic jam or an unusually warm day could spell disaster, as their perfect, opaque block of ice would slowly begin to melt, gradually revealing the glass bottles suspended inside like ancient relics in a museum of failure. 27. In the late 19th century, San Francisco's port was a hotbed of international trade and, consequently, a playground for creative opium smugglers. One of the more artistic, yet ultimately daft schemes involved hiding the drug inside ornate, traditional Chinese lanterns. The smugglers would pack the opium deep within the intricate paper and bamboo frames, banking on the idea that the lantern's beauty and cultural significance would shield them from a thorough inspection. However, customs agents quickly caught on. They noticed that certain shipments of lanterns were unusually heavy and dense. The gig was up when an agent, likely annoyed by the weight, simply tore one of the delicate lanterns apart, unleashing a shower not of festive confetti, but of a very large quantity of illegal drugs all over his desk. 28. When you can't trust a human accomplice, why not recruit an animal? In a truly bizarre and desperate ploy, some smugglers used unsuspecting family pets as their couriers. The low-tech operation involved taking a dog or a cat, attaching a small package of contraband to its collar or harness, and then letting it wander across the border. An associate on the other side would then simply call the animal's name, and the furry delivery service would happily trot over, completely unaware of its role in an international crime ring. The plan was, to put it lightly, unreliable. Animals aren't exactly known for their punctuality or their ability to follow complex instructions. Countless smuggling attempts failed when the dog decided to chase a squirrel, take a nap under a bush, or deliver its valuable package to a friendly stranger who offered a better treat. 29. Con artists will use any disguise to their advantage, and that includes the cloth. One of the most audacious roles a smuggler could adopt was that of a priest. A man would put on the full clerical attire, assume a piously solemn expression, and attempt to transport his goods under the guise of a holy mission. His key prop was a large container labeled holy water, supposedly for a church ceremony. Of course, the container wasn't filled with blessed water, it was filled to the brim with pure grain alcohol. This ruse relied entirely on the authorities being too intimidated to question a man of God. But a skeptical agent who decided to take a cautious sniff of the holy water would be met not with the faint scent of sanctity, but with the powerful, unmistakable fumes of an industrial distillery. 30. The lumber trade has long been a major link between the US and Canada, and some smugglers saw the massive timber rafts floating downriver as a golden opportunity. Their incredibly work-intensive plan was to select large, thick logs, hollow them out like giant wooden submarines, and then pack the cavities with hundreds of bottles of whiskey. The logs would be meticulously sealed and sent downriver as part of a legitimate lumber shipment. This was a high-risk strategy. If a single log wasn't sealed perfectly, it could take on water and sink, sending a fortune in liquor to the riverbed. More often, they were busted when an inspector, using a long metal spike to check the logs for rot, was met with the very distinct and incriminating sound of shattering glass from deep inside the timber. 31. Hiding diamonds requires a delicate touch, and one smuggler thought he'd found the perfect, if aromatic, hiding spot: a giant wheel of artisanal cheese. The idea itself wasn't completely terrible, as few customs agents are also trained cheese experts. The plan, however, was completely undone by the smuggler's utter inability to act naturally. Instead of behaving like a proud cheese merchant, he treated the dairy product like it was a live bomb. He was a nervous, sweating wreck, his eyes darting around constantly. He would physically flinch if anyone got too close to his precious cargo, carrying it with the terrified delicacy of a man transporting a Fabergé egg through a mosh pit. His body language screamed, "I'm hiding something," prompting the agents to slice open his cheese and discover the most valuable and least appetizing filling imaginable. 32. The simple egg. A breakfast staple, a symbol of life, and for a short, strange time, a tiny, fragile container for illegal booze. This mind-numbingly tedious scheme required smugglers to poke a tiny hole in an eggshell, carefully blow out the contents, and then use a syringe to refill the hollow shell with high-proof alcohol. The hole was then sealed with a speck of wax, and the egg was placed back in a carton. Besides being an absurd amount of work for a tiny reward, the plan was a structural catastrophe. Eggshells are notoriously fragile. Entire shipments were lost when a carton was jostled, resulting in a soggy mess of broken shells and the overpowering smell of an alcoholic omelet. A dead giveaway to any inspector who wasn't a complete yoke. That's our collection of 32 spectacularly bad ideas. But we know American history is a goldmine of incompetence, and we couldn't possibly have found them all. So now it's your turn. Scour the comments and tell us, what is the single dumbest, most absurd local smuggling legend or historical fail that we absolutely need to know about for a potential part 2? The most upvoted blunders might just make the cut. If this festival of failure earned your respect, show it to the like button and subscribe for more historical proof that common sense has never been common.